I am Tammy, 32 years old, and I finally bought my dream apartment after years of hard work and saving every penny. The day I got the keys was the happiest moment of my life. I spent weeks preparing for the perfect housewarming party, cooking all my family's favorite dishes. But as 6 o'clock came and went, no one showed up. Not my parents, not my brother, no one. The truth I discovered that night changed everything. If you are watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you are from. Hit that like button and subscribe to join me on this journey of self-discovery. I grew up in a middle-class suburb just outside of Chicago. Our house was modest but comfortable with a small backyard, where my dad would host barbecues during summer weekends. From the outside, we probably looked like the perfect American family: mom, dad, daughter, and son. But inside those walls, the dynamics were far from equal. My younger brother Jordan was always the golden child. 3 years younger than me, he showed an early aptitude for mathematics that had my parents calling him a genius before he even started kindergarten. While I struggled through algebra, Jordan was solving complex equations that even my parents had trouble understanding. My father, Frank, a mechanical engineer, saw Jordan as his legacy, the son who would follow in his footsteps and surpass his achievements. Me, I was just the older sister, the one who got good grades but was never exceptional, the one who worked hard but never quite hard enough to earn the same praise Jordan received just for existing. Every parent-teacher conference ended the same way. Tammy is doing fine, but have you seen what Jordan can do? My mother, Patricia, was slightly warmer than my father, but she always deferred to his opinions and priorities. She worked part-time as a dental hygienist, spending most of her energy maintaining the household and nurturing Jordan's talents. Sometimes when Dad wasn't around, she would praise my artwork or my writing, but those moments were fleeting and always came with a whisper not to tell Dad she was encouraging impractical pursuits. The inequality was obvious in how our achievements were celebrated. When I made honor roll in high school, I got a good job and perhaps a pat on the shoulder. When Jordan won the regional science fair, we had a family dinner at an expensive restaurant, and he received a brand new computer. My accomplishments were expected. His were exceptional. The only person who ever truly saw me was my grandmother Grace, my mother's mother. She lived about 30 minutes away, and visits to her house were my sanctuary. Unlike my parents, she would listen to my stories, praise my creativity, and tell me that my worth wasn't measured by comparing me to anyone else. "Your light shines differently than your brother's," she would say, "but that doesn't make it any less bright." It was Grandma Grace who encouraged me to apply for college scholarships when my parents made it clear that they were saving most of their college fund for Jordan's education at a prestigious university. "He has more potential," my father had said bluntly over dinner one night. "It's just practical to invest where we'll get the best return." Those words stung, but they also lit a fire in me. I applied for every scholarship I could find, wrote dozens of essays, and worked weekends at a local coffee shop to save money. When acceptance letters arrived, I had enough scholarship money to attend a good state university without needing my parents' financial support. The day I left for college was the first day I felt truly free. I was determined to build a life that was mine, one where I didn't have to compete for approval or love. I majored in interior design, combining my creativity with practical skills. My parents thought it was a fluffy degree, but I ignored their skepticism. During college, I worked internships every summer, building my portfolio and making connections. After graduation, I landed a job at a small but respected interior design firm in Chicago. The pay wasn't great at first, but I lived frugally, sharing an apartment with 2 roommates and saving every extra dollar. Over the next 8 years, I worked my way up in the company, eventually becoming a senior designer with my own clients. Meanwhile, Jordan bounced between prestigious graduate programs, never quite settling on a career path, despite our parents' continued financial support. He was brilliant, but directionless, always chasing the next interesting problem, rather than building something sustainable. I, on the other hand, had a plan. Since my first apartment with roommates, I had dreamed of owning my own place. Not just any apartment, but a specific type in a specific neighborhood. I wanted a pre-war building with character-high ceilings and original details. I wanted to be in Lincoln Park, close enough to the lake for morning runs, but also near the small art galleries and boutiques I loved. Every month I put money into my savings account labeled Dream Home. Even when friends invited me on expensive vacations or shopping sprees, I stayed focused. This wasn't just about having property. It was about creating a space that was truly mine, one that reflected my achievements and my aesthetic. By the time I turned 32, I had saved enough for a substantial down payment. I was ready to find my dream home. The search for my perfect apartment took 6 months. I looked at dozens of places, but none of them felt right. Some were in the wrong location. Others had been renovated in a way that stripped away all the original character, and many were simply out of my price range. I was starting to think I might need to compromise on my dream when my realtor called about a new listing. "It just came on the market yesterday," she said, excitement evident in her voice. 2-bedroom in a 1,922 building in Lincoln Park. Original hardwood floors, crown molding, even a little balcony. The previous owner was an old lady who lived there for 40 years and kept everything in pristine condition. I toured it that same afternoon and knew immediately this was it. The living room had tall windows that flooded the space with natural light. The kitchen was small but had been updated with quality appliances. The primary bedroom could easily fit my queen-sized bed and the antique dresser I had inherited from Grandma Grace. The second bedroom would make a perfect home office. Most importantly, it felt right. I could envision my furniture in the spaces, my art on the walls, my books on built-in shelves that I planned to add. This wasn't just a property investment, it was the backdrop for the next chapter of my life. The asking price was at the very top of my budget, and there were already other interested buyers. I submitted an offer that night going slightly above asking price, but including a personal letter about why the apartment meant so much to me. 2 days of anxious waiting later, my realtor called to tell me my offer had been accepted. The mortgage process was stressful. As a self-employed person, with a good, but not exceptional income, I had to provide mountains of documentation. There were moments when I feared the loan would fall through, but finally, after what felt like endless paperwork and inspections, we reached closing day. Sitting at that table signing document after document, I felt a mixture of terror and elation. The amount of debt I was taking on was daunting, but when the seller handed me the keys, tears welled up in my eyes. These weren't just keys to an apartment, they were keys to independence, to a life I had built on my own terms. The first night in my new apartment, I slept on a mattress on the floor because my furniture wouldn't be delivered until the following week. I didn't care. I walked from room to room making plans, measuring for curtains, imagining the possibilities. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had created something my family couldn't diminish or ignore. Over the next month, I transformed the space. I painted the living room a soft sage green that complemented the original woodwork. I installed floating shelves in the office and filled them with design books and inspirational objects. I splurged on a comfortable sectional sofa in a rich blue velvet that anchored the living room. Each decision was made thoughtfully, creating a home that reflected who I was. The dining area featured a vintage table I had refinished myself, surrounded by mid-century chairs I had collected over the years. The bedroom became a sanctuary, with layered textiles and soft lighting. As the apartment came together, I decided it was time to share it with my family. Despite our complicated relationship, I wanted them to see what I had accomplished. More than that, I wanted them to be proud of me, to acknowledge that my path had led to something beautiful and meaningful. I planned the housewarming party meticulously. The date was set for a Saturday evening in June, when the weather would be perfect for guests to enjoy the small balcony. I created formal invitations with an elegant design that matched my aesthetic and mailed them 3 weeks in advance to ensure everyone could save the date. The guest list included my parents Jordan and his girlfriend, Alicia Grandma Grace, a few cousins, and several close friends from work. I texted everyone a week before to confirm they were coming, and to my delight, everyone responded positively. Even my father, who typically avoided social gatherings, said he was looking forward to seeing the place. I planned the menu with care, incorporating favorites from everyone invited. My father's preferred bourbon would be available for drinks. My mother's favorite chicken dish would be served. I even included Jordan's beloved childhood dessert, brownies with mint chocolate chip ice cream. For Grandma Grace, I planned to serve the tea sandwiches she had taught me to make when I was a child. The day before the party, I cleaned every surface until the apartment gleamed. I arranged fresh flowers in strategic locations and set up a small bar on the dining table. I prepared as much food as possible in advance, marinating the chicken and chopping vegetables for the appetizers. That night, I could hardly sleep from excitement. After years of feeling overlooked, I would finally have a chance to show my family that I had created something special, something worthy of their attention and approval. I woke up at 6 on the morning of the party, too excited to sleep, despite having been up late preparing. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the apartment in a golden glow that felt like a good omen. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat on my small balcony, mentally going through my to-do list for the day. By 9, I was in full preparation mode. I finished the last of the cooking, arranged the appetizers on serving platters that I covered and refrigerated, and set out candles that I would light just before guests arrived. I wanted everything to be perfect. Around noon, my phone chimed with a text message from Grandma Grace. "Sorry, sweetheart. My back is acting up today. Don't think I can make the drive. Will call you tomorrow to hear all about it. Love you." I felt a pang of disappointment. Grandma Grace was the one person I most wanted to show the apartment to, the one who had always believed in me. But at 82, her mobility issues were becoming more frequent, and I understood. I texted back that I loved her and would call her the next day with all the details. With that small hiccup aside, I continued preparing. I took a long shower, did my hair and makeup carefully, and put on the new dress I had bought specifically for the occasion, a forest green wrap dress that complemented my eyes and made me feel confident. By 5:30, everything was ready. The apartment looked like something out of a design magazine. The food was prepared, drinks were chilled, and music played softly in the background. I lit the candles, adjusted a few pillows, and waited for the first guests to arrive. 6 o'clock came and went. I wasn't too concerned. People are often a little late to parties. I checked my phone to make sure I hadn't missed any messages. Nothing. By 6:30, I was starting to feel anxious. I sent a group text to my family. "Everything's ready. Looking forward to seeing you all soon." No one responded. At 7, the chicken had been sitting out for too long, and I had to put it back in the oven to keep it warm. I tried calling my mother's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried my father next with the same result. Finally, I called Jordan, but his phone rang without answer. By 7:30, I had called everyone multiple times. The candles had burned down significantly, and I had to replace a few. The ice in the ice bucket had mostly melted. The perfect temperature of the white wine was long gone. I sat on my beautiful new sofa, still trying to convince myself that there must be some misunderstanding, some emergency, that had prevented everyone from coming or even calling. At 8 o'clock, I had to accept the truth. No one was coming. Not a single person I had invited had shown up or bothered to call with an excuse. I sat alone in my perfectly arranged apartment, surrounded by enough food to feed 15 people, wearing a new dress with nowhere to go. The initial shock gave way to hurt, and then to anger. I had invited them weeks in advance. They had all confirmed they were coming. What could possibly have happened? I picked up my phone again, this time opening Instagram rather than the phone app. I scrolled through my feed, and that's when I saw it. A post from Alicia, Jordan's girlfriend, posted just 1 hour ago. The caption read, "Celebrating Jay's amazing new place." The photo showed a group of people raising glasses in a toast. In the background, I could make out my parents smiling proudly. Another photo in the carousel showed Jordan cutting a cake with, "Congratulations on your new home" written on it. A third showed a panorama of a sleek, modern apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture. I swiped through the photos in disbelief, recognizing more faces with each image. There were my cousins, the same ones who had RSVP'd to my party. There were even 2 colleagues from my office who had told me they couldn't make it to my housewarming because they had prior commitments. As the reality sank in, I felt physically ill. My brother had bought an apartment. He had scheduled his housewarming for the exact same day and time as mine. And everyone, literally everyone, had chosen to go to his party instead of mine. Not only that, but no one had even bothered to tell me they weren't coming. I scrolled frantically through more social media posts, piecing together what had happened. Jordan had apparently closed on a luxury condo in a new high-rise downtown. From the comments I gathered that our parents had helped with the down payment, a substantial amount based on the type of property it appeared to be. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Jordan must have known about my housewarming when he scheduled his. He must have deliberately chosen the same day, forcing our family and friends to choose between us. And they had all chosen him without exception. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I dropped my phone onto the sofa and stood up, needing to move to do something, to release the storm of emotions building inside me. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely walk straight as I moved to the kitchen. All the food I had prepared so carefully sat untouched. The chicken I had marinated for 24 hours. The homemade hummus my mother had always praised. The special brownies I had made for Jordan, who would never eat them. In a sudden surge of rage, I grabbed the platter of chicken and threw it into the trash. The hummus followed, then the salad, then the carefully arranged cheese board. Each discarded dish represented hours of planning and preparation, all wasted. Tears streamed down my face as I destroyed the evidence of my hopeful anticipation. How could I have been so naive? How could I have believed after all these years that my achievements would finally be valued, that my family would finally see me? The most painful part wasn't that they had gone to Jordan's party instead of mine. It was that they hadn't even bothered to tell me. They had let me prepare and wait, and hope, knowing all along that they would never show up. The deliberate cruelty of that silence was what broke me. I thought of all the times throughout my life when Jordan's needs and achievements had overshadowed mine. The family vacations planned around his academic competitions. The dinners interrupted by phone calls about his latest accomplishment. The college fund that went mostly to him despite my better grades. But this was different. This wasn't just prioritizing him. This was actively hurting me. This was a collective decision by my entire family to reject me on what should have been one of the proudest days of my life. I sank to the kitchen floor, my new dress crumpling beneath me, and let out a sob that seemed to come from the very depths of my being. It was the cry of a lifetime of second place, of never being enough, of trying so hard for approval that would never come. I don't know how long I sat there crying. Long enough that the apartment grew dark as the sun set. Long enough that my throat became raw and my eyes swollen. Eventually, the tears subsided, leaving behind a hollow feeling and a strange calm. I got up from the floor, walked to the living room, and turned off all the lights. In the darkness, I sat on my sofa and stared out the window at the city lights. The apartment that had felt so perfect just hours ago now felt like a monument to my self-deception. I had believed that this achievement, buying this home on my own, would somehow change how my family saw me. I had been wrong. As I sat in the dark, a new feeling began to replace the hurt and anger. It was a quiet, steady resolve. This apartment was still mine. I had earned it through my own hard work, without help from anyone. My family's rejection couldn't take that away from me. I reached for the light switch, ready to face my empty apartment with new eyes. As the lights came on, my phone lit up with a notification. A text message from my mother. "We need to talk now." Not "I'm sorry we missed your party." Not "There's been a misunderstanding." Just a demand to talk, as if I were the one who had done something wrong. I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the reply button. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the immediate need to respond to my mother's summons. Whatever explanation she wanted to offer could wait. Tonight, I needed to tend to my own wounded heart. I woke up the next morning with swollen eyes and a headache from crying, but also with a strange sense of clarity. I had 7 missed calls, 3 from my mother, 2 from my father, and 2 from an unknown number. There were also multiple text messages, all variations on "call me" or "we need to talk." None contained an apology. As I was making coffee, my phone rang again. This time it was Grandma Grace. Despite my resolution not to talk to any family members, I answered her call. "Tammy, sweetheart." Her voice was warm but concerned. "I just heard what happened. I am so sorry." "You knew?" I asked, my voice still hoarse from crying. "No, not until this morning, when your mother called me. She said there was a misunderstanding about the parties." I laughed bitterly. "There was no misunderstanding, Grandma. Jordan scheduled his housewarming the same day as mine. Everyone knew about both parties. They chose to go to his." There was a pause before Grandma Grace spoke again, her voice lower. "I suspected as much. Your mother tried to make it sound like an accident, but it seemed too coincidental." "Did she tell you they helped Jordan buy his place, after telling me for years that I needed to be financially independent?" "No," she conveniently left that part out. Grandma Grace sighed. "Tammy, I know you are hurt, and you have every right to be. But I think you need to confront them. Not for their sake, but for yours. You need to say your piece." "What's the point? They've made it clear where I stand." "The point is that you deserve to be heard. And running away, avoiding them, that's what they expect you to do. That's what you've always done. Maybe it's time to surprise them." I considered her words. She was right. Throughout my life, I had swallowed my hurt and disappointment, retreating into myself, rather than demanding the respect I deserved. "What would you do if you were me?" I asked. "I would show up at their house for Sunday breakfast. That's when they'll all be there, including Jordan. I would walk in with my head held high and tell them exactly how I feel. And then I would set some boundaries that should have been set long ago." After talking with Grandma Grace, I spent the rest of Saturday cleaning up the remains of my failed party and thinking about what I would say to my family. By Sunday morning, I had made my decision. I dressed carefully in jeans and a simple blue blouse, not trying to impress anyone, but wanting to feel confident. The drive to my parents' house took 30 minutes time I used to rehearse what I wanted to say. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw both my parents' cars and Jordan's expensive sports car. Perfect. Everyone would be there to hear me. I didn't bother knocking. I used my key and walked in to find them all in the dining room, eating Belgian waffles and bacon. Jordan and Alicia sat on one side of the table, my parents on the other. They all looked up in surprise when I entered. "Tammy." My mother stood up, her face a mixture of concern and wariness. "We've been trying to reach you. Why didn't you call back?" I remained standing in the doorway, not accepting the implicit invitation to join them at the table. I was busy dealing with the aftermath of preparing a party for 15 people who never showed up. I said, my voice steadier than I expected it to be. My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. "There was a miscommunication. We thought you knew about Jordan's event." "A miscommunication," I repeated. "I sent invitations 3 weeks ago. Everyone RSVP'd yes. No one called or texted to cancel. That's not a miscommunication. That's a deliberate choice." Jordan shifted in his seat, looking annoyed rather than apologetic. "It's not that big a deal, Tam. It's just a party. It's not just a party, Jordan. It's a pattern. My entire life I've been the afterthought. The backup plan. The one who's expected to understand when plans change and I'm no longer included. That's not fair, my mother protested weakly. We love you both equally. No, you don't, I said, surprised by how calm I felt, stating this truth that had shaped my entire life. You never have, and normally I can live with that. I've built a life that doesn't depend on your approval. But what you did yesterday was cruel, and I won't pretend it wasn't. My father's face hardened. You're being dramatic. Jordan's apartment purchase was a bigger deal. He needed our support. Why? I challenged. Because you helped pay for it. Because his achievement is actually partially yours. My mother looked startled. How did you... Instagram, I cut her off. Pictures of his place are all over social media. It's obviously a luxury condo he couldn't afford on his own, with his part-time research position. Jordan stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. You're just jealous because my place is nicer than yours. Always competing with me. Always trying to prove you're better somehow. I laughed, genuinely amused by his distorted perspective. Jordan, I've never competed with you. I couldn't. The game was rigged from the start. You were always going to be the favorite, no matter what either of us did. That's enough, my father said sharply. You don't get to come in here and attack your brother just because you're feeling left out. I'm not attacking him. I'm finally saying what should have been said years ago. I bought my apartment entirely on my own. Every penny of the down payment came from money I saved while working full-time. I found it, I negotiated the price, I secured the mortgage. It's not as luxurious as Jordan's place, but it's mine. In a way, his will never be his. I turned to look directly at Jordan. And you knew exactly what you were doing when you scheduled your housewarming the same day as mine. You knew everyone would choose you, like they always do. You could have picked any other day, but you wanted to make sure my achievement was overshadowed. Again. For the first time, Jordan looked slightly ashamed. He glanced at Alicia, who was staring intently at her plate, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. I didn't think it would be a big deal, he muttered, but the excuse sounded hollow even to him. My mother stood up and tried to approach me, her hands outstretched in a placating gesture. Tammy, we're sorry if you felt excluded. That wasn't our intention. We can come see your apartment today if you want. I stepped back, avoiding her touch. I don't want you to come because you feel guilty. The time for that was yesterday. Today, I'm letting you know that things are going to change. I'm not going to keep showing up and hoping for scraps of attention or approval. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't hurt when you treat me as less important than Jordan. What are you saying? My father asked, a hint of worry, finally creeping into his voice. I'm saying that I'm setting boundaries. I'll still be part of this family, but on my terms. I won't be available for last-minute cancellations or afterthoughts. I won't keep trying to earn the kind of love and support that should be unconditional. As I finished speaking, the front door opened, and Grandma Grace walked in, moving slowly with her cane, but with determination in every step. I thought I might find you all here, she said, nodding to me with approval in her eyes. Mom, now isn't a good time, my mother began, but Grandma Grace waved her off. Now is exactly the right time. I've watched this family dynamic for decades, and I've been complicit by staying silent. No more. She turned to my parents. You have 2 children, not 1. Both of them deserve your support and attention. Both of them have achievements worth celebrating. My father started to protest, but Grandma Grace cut him off with a sharp look. Frank, you've always favored Jordan because he reminds you of yourself. But have you noticed that while Tammy has built a stable career and now owns her own home, Jordan is still dependent on you at 39? Have you considered that your favoritism hasn't actually done him any favors? Jordan flushed with anger, but Grandma Grace wasn't finished. And Patricia, you've gone along with this unequal treatment because it was easier than standing up to Frank. I raised you better than that. The room fell silent. I had never heard Grandma Grace speak so bluntly to anyone, let alone her own daughter and son-in-law. I took a deep breath. I'm going to leave now. I've said what I needed to say. You all can decide what happens next. As I turned to go, my mother called after me, her voice small. Tammy, please, can we talk about this? I paused at the door. You can call me next week. If you're ready to have an honest conversation about how things have been and how they need to change, I'll listen. If you just want to make excuses or tell me I'm overreacting, don't bother. With that, I walked out, Grandma Grace following close behind. For the first time in my life, I had stood up to my family without backing down or accepting less than I deserved. It felt terrifying, but also strangely freeing. In the weeks that followed my confrontation with my family, I experienced a range of emotions. Some days I felt strong and empowered by having finally spoken my truth. Other days I was consumed by doubt, wondering if I had overreacted or burned bridges unnecessarily. What remained constant was a growing sense of self-respect that I had never fully allowed myself before. The first few days after our confrontation, my phone was flooded with messages from my family. My mother's texts oscillated between defensiveness. We never meant to hurt you, and guilt-tripping. You've really upset your father. Jordan sent a single text that read, sorry if you felt bad. The classic non-apology that placed the problem in my perception rather than his actions. I didn't respond to any of them. I needed time to process my feelings without being pulled back into old patterns. Instead, I focused on truly making my apartment my own. I hung artwork, planted herbs on my balcony, and invited colleagues over for dinner. People who valued me for who I was, not where I ranked in a family hierarchy. 10 days after the confrontation, I received a handwritten letter from my father, something so unprecedented that I stared at the envelope for several minutes before opening it. Inside was a 3-page letter written in his precise engineer's handwriting. He began by acknowledging that he had always been harder on me than on Jordan, expecting more maturity and independence from me from an early age. He admitted that he had taken pride in my self-sufficiency, while simultaneously using it as justification for giving Jordan more support and attention. He didn't directly apologize for missing my housewarming, but he did express admiration for what I had accomplished on my own, and asked if he could see my apartment sometime. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was more self-awareness than my father had ever shown before. I called him and arranged for him to visit the following weekend, just him, not my mother or Jordan. When he arrived, he seemed uncomfortable initially, standing awkwardly in my living room and making small talk about the neighborhood. But as I showed him around, pointing out the original architectural details that had drawn me to the place and explaining the renovations I planned to make, he began to engage more genuinely. He asked questions about the building's history and examined the crown molding with professional interest. When I showed him my home office with its wall of books and organized workspace, something shifted in his expression. "You've done well, Tammy," he said finally, his voice gruff with emotion. "Really well. This place suits you." It was perhaps the most straightforward compliment he had ever given me, and I felt its impact like a physical warmth in my chest. "Thank you, Dad," I replied simply. We sat on my balcony with coffee, and for the first time in my adult life, had a conversation that felt like it was between equals. He talked about his concerns for Jordan, who at 29 still hadn't found a career path he wanted to commit to. He admitted that perhaps he and Mom had made things too easy for him. "We thought we were helping," he said, looking out at the city view rather than at me. "But maybe we were just making him dependent." I didn't argue or agree. It wasn't my place to solve their relationship with Jordan, but I did feel a small measure of vindication that my father was finally seeing the consequences of their unequal parenting. My mother took longer to come around. When she finally called, rather than texted, her first words were, "Your father says, your apartment is very nice." "It is," I confirmed, not giving her an inch. There was a pause, and then she asked, "Would you have lunch with me tomorrow? Just the two of us." I agreed, and we met at a small cafe halfway between our homes. She seemed smaller, somehow less confident than I was used to seeing her. She apologized almost immediately for missing my housewarming, though she still framed it as a misunderstanding, rather than a deliberate choice. But then she surprised me. "Your grandmother read me the riot act," she admitted. She said, "I've been a coward letting your father dictate how we treat you in Jordan. She said I failed you as a mother." I remained silent, letting her continue. "The worst part is she's right. I've always known it wasn't fair how differently we treated you two. I told myself it was because you were stronger, more capable. You didn't need us the way Jordan did. But that was just an excuse to avoid conflict with your father." Tears filled her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Tammy. You deserved better from me. From all of us." It was the honest acknowledgement I had always wanted, and it moved me deeply. But I was also wary of falling back into old patterns. "I appreciate that, Mom. I really do. But things need to actually change, not just be acknowledged." She nodded. "I know. I'm working on it. Your father and I both are. We've told Jordan he needs to start paying rent on his condo. We're not going to cover the mortgage indefinitely." He was furious, but it's time. That was a start, but I was more interested in how our relationship would change. "And what about you and me? What's going to be different?" She reached across the table and tentatively took my hand. "I want to know you, Tammy. The real you. Not just the daughter I thought you should be. I want to see your work, hear about your friends, understand what matters to you, if you'll give me the chance." It was what I had wanted to hear for so long, but now that the moment was here, I felt vulnerable, acknowledging how much it meant to me. I'd like that I said simply. Jordan was the most resistant to change. He avoided me entirely for nearly a month, ignoring my calls and making excuses to miss the small family dinner my mother organized. When we finally did see each other at a cousin's birthday party, he was coldly polite, treating me like an acquaintance rather than a sister. I pulled him aside toward the end of the evening. "Are we going to talk about what happened, or are you going to keep pretending I don't exist?" He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "What's there to talk about? You had a meltdown because people chose my party over yours. You made Mom cry and turned Dad against me. Congratulations." I shook my head, realizing he truly didn't understand what had happened. "That's not what this is about, Jordan. It's about years of unequal treatment. It's about you deliberately scheduling your housewarming the same day as mine, because you knew everyone would choose you. It's about you never having to work for anything because it's all handed to you." "That's not fair," he protested, but there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Isn't it? Tell me honestly, did you know about my housewarming when you scheduled yours?" He hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Alicia saw your invitation at Mom and Dad's. She suggested we do ours the same day. She thought it would be more convenient for the family to attend both on the same day." I raised an eyebrow skeptically. "Fine," he admitted. "We knew people would choose mine. The location is better, and it's a bigger place. We didn't think you'd be so upset about it." "Because you've never had to think about how your actions affect me," I said quietly. "You've always been the center of the family universe, but that's changing now, Jordan. Not because I'm trying to take your place, but because I'm not accepting the leftover spot anymore." He looked uncomfortable but also thoughtful. For the first time, I felt like he was actually seeing me as a separate person, with my own valid feelings, not just an extension of his life or a supporting character in his story. "I don't know how to do this differently," he said finally. "Neither do I admitted, "but we could try to figure it out together." It was a small opening, but it was something. As the weeks passed, Jordan and I began to build a different kind of relationship. It was tentative, and sometimes awkward, but it felt more honest than anything we'd had before. The most significant change, however, was in my relationship with myself. Standing up to my family had broken something open inside me, a lifelong belief that I was somehow less deserving, less important, less worthy of attention and care. I began to recognize how that belief had shaped my choices, my friendships, even my romantic relationships. I had always settled for less than I deserved because I didn't believe I was entitled to more. No more. I started therapy to work through these patterns. I began to speak up more assertively at work, resulting in a promotion and a substantial raise. I ended a casual relationship with a man who was only available on his terms, making space for the possibility of a partner who would prioritize me as much as I prioritized them. 3 months after the confrontation, I decided it was time for a do-over. I planned another housewarming party, but this one was entirely different. The guest list included only people who had demonstrated that they valued me, close friends from work neighbors. I had connected with a few cousins who had reached out independently to apologize for missing my first party, and of course, Grandma Grace, who was given the guest room for the weekend, so she wouldn't have to drive home. I also invited my parents, but with clear expectations. "This is important to me," I told them. "If you commit to coming, I need you to actually show up. No last-minute changes." They both promised, and to my cautious relief, they kept their word. Jordan and Alicia were also invited, but declined due to a work commitment of Alicia's. I was okay with that. Our relationship was improving, but we weren't yet at a place where I fully trusted him in social situations. The party was everything I had hoped the first one would be. My apartment was filled with genuine laughter and warm conversations. People admired the space I had created and celebrated my achievement without qualification or comparison. My father actually bragged to one of my friends about my eye for design, while my mother helped serve food and asked thoughtful questions about my renovation plans. As the evening wound down and the last guest departed, I stood in my living room, surveying the evidence of a successful gathering: empty wine glasses, crumb-covered plates, flowers slightly wilted from the warmth of conversation. This was what I had wanted all along, not just an apartment of my own, but a life of my own, filled with people who saw and valued me for exactly who I was. It has been a year since that tumultuous weekend, when no one came to my first housewarming party. A year of setting boundaries, building new relationships, and redefining old ones. A year of growing into myself and my space. My apartment has evolved along with me. What started as a shell of potential has become a true reflection of who I am. I finally installed the built-in bookshelves I had dreamed of in the living room with the help of a carpenter friend who taught me how to use power tools in the process. I transformed the small second bedroom into a combination home office and art studio, where I now spend weekends working on watercolor paintings, a hobby I had abandoned in college when my father dismissed it as impractical. The healing process with my family has not been linear. There have been setbacks and old patterns that sometimes re-emerge. My father still occasionally compares me to Jordan, though he catches himself more quickly now. My mother still struggles to stand up to him, though she makes more effort to connect with me independently. Jordan and I have established a cautious friendship based on who we are now, rather than the roles we played growing up. The most profound change has been within myself. The constant need for validation that had driven me for decades has gradually quieted. I still appreciate recognition and love, but I no longer base my self-worth on whether others, especially my family, see and acknowledge my achievements. Grandma Grace, my steadfast supporter, moved into an assisted living facility 6 months ago when her mobility issues worsened. I visit her every Sunday, often bringing my watercolors to show her my latest work. During one of these visits, she took my hand and said something that crystallized the journey I had been on. "You know, Tammy," she said, her voice frailer now, but her eyes as sharp as ever, "the greatest freedom in life is not needing everyone to love you exactly the way you want to be loved. It's learning to accept the love that is offered, setting boundaries around what hurts you, and filling in the gaps yourself." Her words stayed with me, a perfect articulation of what I had been learning. For so long, I had been trying to earn a specific kind of love and recognition from my family, one that put me on equal footing with Jordan, one that celebrated my achievements with the same enthusiasm they showed for his. I had structured my entire life around that pursuit, and it had never been enough. The breakthrough came when I stopped trying to change them and started changing my expectations instead. I accepted that my parents might never love me in exactly the way I had always wanted, but that didn't mean they didn't love me at all. They were flawed people with their own limitations and blind spots. The question wasn't whether they could give me everything I needed, but whether what they could give was enough for us to have a relationship worth preserving. For a while, I wasn't sure. There were days when I considered cutting ties, completely starting fresh, without the weight of family expectations and disappointments. But ultimately, I chose a middle path, maintaining relationships with clear boundaries, accepting what was offered, while protecting myself from what hurt. With my newfound boundaries came unexpected gifts. My mother, freed from playing referee, between me and my father, revealed a playful side I had rarely seen. She started joining me for Saturday morning yoga classes, something she had always wanted to try but my father had dismissed as New Age nonsense. Afterward, we would get coffee and talk, really talk, about her life, my life, our hopes and regrets. My father, faced with the real possibility of losing his relationship with me, made efforts I never thought he was capable of. He asked questions about my work and actually listened to the answers. He learned to express pride without comparative statements about Jordan. He even, to my astonishment, asked me to help him pick out a new sofa for their living room, acknowledging my good taste. Jordan underwent perhaps the most significant transformation. With our parents no longer automatically solving his problems, he had to develop independence and resilience he had never needed before. He struggled at first, nearly losing his condo when he couldn't manage the mortgage payments on his own. But eventually, he found a full-time position that suited his talents and began to experience the satisfaction of earning his own achievements. Our relationship improved as he became more secure in himself. We discovered shared interests we had never explored together, a love of obscure documentaries, a weakness for spicy food, a dry sense of humor that sometimes left others bewildered. For the first time, we related as equals, rather than as rivals, for parental attention. Last month, Jordan and Alicia welcomed their first child, a daughter named Lily. At the hospital, I watched my parents coo over their first grandchild, showering her with the unconditional love they had struggled to distribute evenly between their own children. I felt a momentary pang, wondering if old patterns would re-emerge with this new generation. But then my father turned to me, his eyes bright with emotion, and said, "She has your eyes, Tammy. Those same observant eyes you had as a baby." It was a small moment, but it represented a seismic shift, an acknowledgement that I mattered in the family story, that my presence had value independent of my achievements, or how I compared to others. The journey of the past year has taught me that true independence isn't about isolation or self-sufficiency. It's about knowing your own worth so clearly that you can choose connection without losing yourself in it. It's about building a home within yourself that's so secure that no external validation or rejection can fundamentally shake you. My apartment is a physical manifestation of that inner home. Every corner reflects choices I made for myself, not to impress others or earn approval. It is my sanctuary and my canvas, a place where I can be fully myself without apology or explanation. Sometimes when I sit on my balcony in the evening with a glass of wine watching the city lights come alive, I think about how differently things might have turned out if people had shown up to that first housewarming party. Would I still be seeking validation, trying to earn love through achievements, accepting less than I deserved? The painful rejection turned out to be a gift, forcing me to confront patterns that had limited me for decades. The apartment that was meant to prove my worth to others became instead the space where I learned my worth was never in question. The home I created wasn't valuable because others approved of it. It was valuable because it was mine chosen, and shaped by me reflecting the person I had become, and was still becoming. What about you? Have you ever had to set boundaries with people you love? Has a painful rejection ever turned into an unexpected gift in your life? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more stories about finding your own path, even when it diverges from what others expect of you. Thank you for listening, and remember, the most beautiful homes are the ones we build within ourselves.